Hello, one and all. I bet that's taken you by surprise a little bit, as normally the intro music of the podcast plays right at the beginning. However, this is a pre-recorded introduction before your ears get to listen to the amazing episode that's coming up with Ben Todd from the awesome Moonlight Parade. I felt that pre-recorded intro was needed just to highlight a few things that I wanted to say. So first up, a massive thank you to everyone who has engaged with the Fantastival Podcast so far in 2023. It's been a fantastic Q1, strong growth across all areas of the business. Yeah, strong growth. Listeners have been good, engagement's been good. We are getting towards 1,000 followers on Twitter that I'm very proud of. I don't do a follow for a follow, although if I did, that would take me to 1,000 followers much quicker. I try to keep it organic and grow it naturally, so I'm really happy with that. The guests have been great. Feedback's been great. Really happy with the way the podcast has gone. Turned me on to loads and loads of new music. So I'm absolutely chuffed and thrilled with the way the Fantastival Podcast has gone so far in 2023. So that's my first point. Second of 4 points I've got is looking at my guest list over the last couple of weeks. It's all blokes. It reads like a Glastonbury headline slot details almost. So what I want to try and focus on in the upcoming episodes, next couple of months, try to get more female guests on the Fantastival Podcast. So if you've noticed that and haven't said anything, then bless your hearts. But something that I've noticed and I'm a bit sad about, as I didn't notice it earlier. So more female guests is the priority for the Fantastival Podcast. If you've got any acts in mind, whether that's a new act, an established act, anyone you think would be great for the podcast, give me a shout. I've got a few names swirling around in my head who I'll be approaching soon. So very excited about that. And talking about kind of forthcoming episodes, I mentioned at the end of this episode with Ben is that the Fantastival is taking somewhat of an enforced break with the Easter holidays coming up. It's quite difficult to try and get time to get guests on with basically life schedules and life tasks. So this will be the last episode for about 4 to 5 weeks, I reckon. I'm away, and then my right-hand man, the legendary Darren Houghton, who edits the podcast and makes the theme tune, is also away, and I can't really pull it out without his fine artistic work making me sound much better than what I am. So this is the last episode for a couple of weeks, but please go back into the back episodes if you are a fairly new listener and go and check out loads of bands who have been recommended. And I guess, last of all, this episode then. So this was recorded on Monday, the 20th of March. I felt a bit rough whilst recording this episode, I must confess. And it turns out I actually had COVID. So, and still do have COVID as I'm recording this pre-recorded introduction. So if there's any points that I'm slow to react to or things that I normally catch on to quicker that I don't, then please accept my apologies for being COVID-ridden, but unawareingly COVID-ridden whilst recording this podcast. I don't think it makes a massive difference to the actual podcast. I've listened, it still sounds great. Ben is an amazing guest with a great lineup. Moonlight Parade are a fantastic band, one who you should all go out and check out as soon as this episode ends. So yeah, that's it. Oh, hang on a second. No, also something that I meant to mention as well, something that I would normally have caught, is that Moonlight Parade were actually a Fantastival choice for Kimberly Forsyth back in her episode, and I can't believe I didn't mention it in the forthcoming episode. So, you know, Moonlight Parade, already a Fantastival established act. So apologies to Ben for not mentioning that in the episode. Apologies to Kimbo for not mentioning that. That's something that wouldn't have got past me if I was 100% fit. So at almost 4 minutes 30, it's enough rambling from me. I shall say again, massive thank you to everyone who listens to the podcast. Enjoy this episode. Enjoy your Easter. We'll be back soon. And this is the Fantastival Podcast, episode 124 with Ben Todd. Enjoy. Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum. In the podcast, I invite my guests to come on, talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collate their fancy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. I hope everyone is well for this one. Lots of people are unwell. COVID seems to be making a slight comeback, especially at my workplace. So I hope everyone at my work is feeling good, is feeling on the mend. And I hope everyone's looking forward to their Easter breaks. Easter coming up very shortly. So I wish everyone a very happy Easter holiday or break for whatever they have planned. And before I introduce this week's guest, just want to give a bit of a shout out to Matthew Hickman of Brown Bear. He was my guest on the last episode of the podcast. That was episode 123. He's just released his amazing new album, Demons. It's an absolute masterpiece, definitely a contender for album of the year so far. And he made many great points about the music industry, his take on festivals, and he just told lots and lots of fascinating stories. So if you've not listened to that one, please go back after listening to this episode and give Matt a listen. You will not regret that at all. So that was 123. This episode is 124, and I'm delighted to introduce the guest for this one. This gent plays guitar, also does vocals for the awesome Moonlight Parade. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ben Todd.
Hello, how are you doing?
Ben, I am very well. I'm so happy to finally get Moonlight Parade, or a member of Moonlight Parade, on the Fantastival Podcast. I know there's lots going on in the world of Moonlight Parade. And before we start talking about your musical journey and Moonlight Parade, I always like to check in with my guests, make sure they're okay from like a mental health perspective. It's almost, it's 3 years now since COVID happened. So Ben, how are you, mate?
I am fine, yeah. COVID didn't affect me work-wise too much because I work outside. So my life sort of carried on work-wise pretty much as normal. But obviously it did got a daughter at secondary school, and it affected her. You know, it went into 2 years of her schooling, really, and she's just coming into her GCSEs now. So they've had a tough time of it. It was quite a unique experience. You know, we never had anything like that growing up. So I've told her that it is very unique, and well done for sort of getting through it and doing her exams. So, yeah. But on the whole, yeah, all healthy.
Great to hear that, Ben. Great to hear that. So this podcast is a lot about you and your musical journey through life. So, Ben, I mean, how did you first get into music?
Very young. So I grew up in Jersey in the Channel Islands, and got an older brother, Jamie, who's 2.5 years older. So everything he listened to filtered down to me. And it really was young. I can remember being 5, 6 or 7 and being into Madness and The Jam and bands like that in the 80s. And there was so much music in the 80s, you know, a lot of pop music, which some of it I did like, you know, as long as it had a melody and it was catchy, I was into. I didn't have that, you know, much taste going on then, but I definitely had an ear and a love for music early on, I think.
And you have a dual role in Moonlight Parade. You play guitar and you sing. So what came first for you? Was it the singing or was it the guitar?
No, it was the guitar, and it was actually quite late. I didn't pick up the guitar till I was 20 or 19 or 20. And I've sort of always been a bit of a reluctant singer. I sort of did it to write songs, and then it always seemed to be me. These are back in the early days where I would end up singing the songs. But that's been... I wouldn't say it's been a struggle, but it's taken a bit of convincing over the years to sort of be the singer. I love songwriting, you know, that is my main passion. But singing, it's a work in progress, really.
And were there bands before Moonlight Parade? So what was kind of your journey up to Moonlight Parade?
Okay, so in Jersey, I sort of around the time I picked up a guitar, early 20s, me and a couple of friends, and my girlfriend, who I'm still with, Jane, we moved from Jersey to Brighton to sort of get more into music. And we were called White Elephant then. There was just 3 of us. And on our first gig, we played with a drum machine, so we were quite unconventional. We were sort of into the Cocteau Twins and bands like that. So we had a funny old sound going on. I didn't have many lyrics. I used to make them up on the spot and stuff. And on the first gig we played at Brighton in the Pressure Point, we met Alex, who is the bass player in Moonlight Parade. So there's a bit of fate going on there. And we were on the same bill, 3 bands. Their band was called Oceans Apart. And at the end, he said, I really like what you were doing. Let's exchange details. And, you know, back then it was still an email address. So that was the start of a friendship between all of us, and then lots of other musicians as well. So it's not just the three of us or five of us in Moonlight Parade. There's a lot more that have come and gone, and different bands over the years. It just happens to be us sort of five at the moment. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then is that kind of just led to the first album? So obviously you meet the guy who ends up playing bass at one of your early gigs in Brighton, and is it just kind of jam it out and then it's like, right, we're going to do this, and it naturally just happens from there?
Not really, because there was quite a big gap. So you're looking at the early 2000s when we all met, so it's getting on 20 years ago. So those bands sort of fizzled out a bit, but we still kept in touch as friends and did the odd practice. But this is really the first time I've actually been in a band with Alex and Steve. So they contacted me in, I think, 2018 and just said, oh, do you fancy trying some ideas over some stuff that we've written? And I was sort of at a bit of a point where I could have gone, I can't be bothered. Music's gone for me now, because it sort of had, in a way. I was still writing songs, but it was like, do I want to do this? And then the other part of me sort of thought, well, this could be fun. It could be exciting, a chance to get more in touch with Alex and Steve. And I sort of went for it. And, here we are 5 years later, and you couldn't really have planned or written what's happened since. So I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I'm glad the one side of your shoulder beat the other side of the shoulder who was saying do it to not do it. So it's fantastic. And I love the way fate works with these band stories, like just random meetings here and there and staying in contact, and then that ends up becoming a band in the future. I love hearing stories like that. So Moonlight Parade then, I haven't been together for that long really in the great scheme of things, but we were saying before we started recording, it's quite a prolific output you guys have had.
Yeah, so the first album was done in 4 months maybe.
Wow.
So that was quick. We were very fast at the beginning, probably slowed down a little bit in sort of writing and performing, but that's because we've been adding the live stuff as well. But yeah, I think so. We've done 3 albums, 2 EPs. There's remixes in there. There's singles that haven't made the records as well, and there's a ton of other stuff that's not seen the light of day. So to give you a scenario, I'll get home every day, and Alex and Steve are the same. Is we'd do something every day. So whether that's sending a vocal across or trying to finish a song, or there's always something happening. Or like we had this CD that we were doing for America, so Alex is very good with artwork, so he'll be finalising that and sending it back to us. And so we're like a sort of little professional outfit, really.
Yeah, you certainly are. Yeah. So, like you say, you've done 3 albums and 2 EPs, so was the plan always to kind of get together and record an album, or was that something that just naturally happened spontaneously?
Yeah, we just had so the songs were getting going at the beginning, and we just reached a point where it was like, might as well put an album out. We'd not really heard of the Twitter music scene then. That was really just a punt, creating an account and then putting our music on there. And the feedback straight away that we got was quite mind-blowing. I thought it was a bit of a wind-up at first, because we've had years really of nothing in other bands. And so, when that became what we thought it was, we just went with it really and made more music.
Absolutely. So Out of Nothing came out in 2018. That was followed fairly quickly, I'd say, in 2019 by Caught in a Wave. So that's quite a quick turnover from album 1 into album 2. And you can kind of hear the sound evolve. And then the last album, What If, came out in 2021.
Yeah, as I say, so we sort of slowed down a little bit. That was pretty quick, as you say. I think we were keen to we recognised early on the social media side of releasing music, you've got to be quite active and doing things regularly. So there's no point. The old way would be do an album, tour, and then do an album 2 years later, wouldn't it, or 3 years later? You can't really do that on social media. So you've got to either be doing a single or doing something to keep people engaged and to keep your name going, really. So that was behind that. And then I think it was the EP of Paint the Sun that was where Robert Carlyle sort of tweeted us that day and, said he liked Invincible. And then that gave us quite a big lift and brought a few more people as well. So there's some really exciting and nice things happened to us. in the last few years.
The Robert Carlyle thing, I still can't quite get my head round. Like, I just find that like crazy that he's so into it, and like will go and find these unsigned bands and push them out from his own Twitter account and give them a nudge and do links. I think that's an amazing job that Robert does there.
And he really is, for his level of what he's achieved in his career. There's not really anybody else at that level, possibly musically, I may be wrong, doing the same thing for like unsigned musicians. So hats off to him.
Yeah, that's
he's a working class hero, isn't he? So he knows what it's like to struggle and try and get somewhere. So he's obviously still retains that, which is important.
Yeah, he certainly does. So What If, like we said, was the last album in 2021. Since then, there's been 2 singles. So we had No More Tears out in 2022 and a fairly recent single, Penny, which came out in January.
Yes, No More Tears was the first one that we'd done quite a lot at home. In fact, everything was nearly done in our home sort of setup. And with No More Tears, we went down to Luke, who plays keyboard for us. He's got like a studio in Lewes, which is just down the road from Brighton. And we sort of took a bit of time and just experimenting, really, see if a different sound would come out with the equipment down there. But what we found is it was a bit too slow for us, really. We can do things very quick the way that we have been doing them, so we've sort of gone back to that way. I think it was good for us to have a bit of a slowdown last year, though, because it had been quite flat out making music. It can be, it's nice to have a break and then get that energy back to sort of want to go again.
Yeah, very important to do that for your mental health as well, and so you keep your head in the game. So that's kind of what's been in the past, but it feels like there's quite an exciting time to be a Moonlight Parade. There's quite a lot going on. So in terms of releases, there's a single, So Clear, coming out on Friday, 7th of April. So I guess tell us about So Clear and what that track's about and what that track's like.
Yeah, that was a funny one. It sort of came out of a jam at practice. I think it was last year. And I think we went on and worked on it. It's one of those you sort of put to the side a little bit, and then when you're flicking through your sort of songs, what we should work on, you think, oh, yeah, that's really got something there. And it's quite unusual in that it takes a little turn at the end, musically, where it sort of drifts down into the sort of arpeggio. And so yeah, we've recorded that, and, that'll be out on April 7th. There's a video out at the moment, which has got, good response. We tried to do it a bit differently. Instead of saying we've got a single out next month, let's do a video and drop it straight away. And so people have got no waiting time. It's there. But also you've got the backup of the single coming out. As for the song itself, what's it about? Good question. Sometimes lyrics just come out and you catch them as they come out and you put them down. So it's not exactly about anything in particular, but it fits.
As long as it fits, it's all good, Ben. So single out Friday 7th of April, and then Friday the 14th of April there's a compilation coming out which is being released in the US on Cool Cat Records, which is Here Comes Moonlight Parade. So I guess my question is, how has this all come about?
That's a good one. We played a gig supporting Beatlemania, who is Beatles tribute act down in Worthing, and just before we were when we were setting up and playing, they were watching us do our sort of sound check. And the singer, not John Lennon, but who was playing John Lennon, liked us, which was nice in itself. And we made contact with him, and he said he's on an American label that produces CDs and sort of sells them on their website, which is called Cat Music, and to see if we'd be interested to give the contact our music, and it's sort of gone from there. So it's with the aim of, his website's quite established, so he's got a lot of contacts over there. So it was just a sort of showcase of what we've done so far. But knowing our fans in the UK, they will want it as well. So we'll get a release for them on the website as well. Because it'd be a nice thing to have 18 songs, on a CD, which you could have in your car or wherever. So it's an extra option.
Yeah, fantastic. I look forward to seeing that come out. That's going to be a real great compilation. I'm looking forward to hearing that. So as well as the single and the album, there's also quite a lot going on live for you. You've got some really, really exciting live dates coming up in 2023.
Yeah, they all seem to be around May and June. So May the 26th, we're at the Water Rats. I've already played there before. That's in London. That's supporting the Heavy North. So it'd be nice to meet those guys because they've had a similar journey to ourselves over the last couple of years. They're doing really well. So we'll go on before them. And then we've got a gig June the 10th in Brighton at Patton supporting My Life Story. And then the one that we sort of dreamed of, I suppose, that sort of fell into our laps is we're playing the Cavern in Liverpool June the 1st. We didn't really have plans to travel up north because it can be quite expensive, if you get a day or two up there. And so that came out of the blue and we've accepted that. And that's part of like this pop festival that's held all week at the Cavern. So I think Maze have done it,
Yeah, Gary. I had Gary on 2 weeks ago. He was saying, I think they're doing it this year as well. He was really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I actually messaged him about it just to see what it was like and stuff, because I saw his name, the name Maze was on it a couple of years ago, so I just asked him what it was like. So that's going to be amazing, So we got lots of practice between now and then to really get it worked out, try and choose from our 60, 70 songs that we've got already.
Yeah, amazing. I look forward to... I'm actually going to that Heavy North gig, so as much as I look forward to meeting the Heavy North, I look forward to seeing Moonlight Parade and meeting your fine self and the rest of your band. That'll be a great night.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people will go into that one from their Twitter community, so it'd be good to meet more faces from there. So that'd be really a real special evening that I'm looking forward to. So Ben, if anyone is listening and doesn't know how to find the Moonlight Parade on social media, where can people find the Moonlight Parade?
Yeah, so all over social media. We do have our own website, which is, it's got the shop attached to it. So if you wanted to buy vinyl or merchandise, and that's www.moonlightparade.com. On Twitter, our handle, I think, is Band Parade, @Band and then Instagram, we are just Moonlight Parade. And also we've got Bandcamp, so you'd find us on Bandcamp. But Twitter's been our main sort of contact with people, but that has changed a little bit in the last sort of year because, as you know, the algorithms have sort of have changed up a bit, haven't they? So that's why we're looking at doing things like videos and maybe trying to get a bit more of a personal contact with people that are sort of interested in us, sort of thing.
Yeah, makes total sense. So Ben, this podcast as well is all about finding out about you as a music fan. So without giving away too many spoilers, music-wise, Ben, what kind of stuff do you like?
So, going back sort of late 80s, early 90s, I was into Stone Roses, and people talk about the Britpop scene quite a lot, but there was actually a sort of scene in the late 80s called Manchester, if you like, with the Charlatans, Stone Roses, Happy Mondays and Spiral Carpets. I was really into that. And that's where I sort of found my place, if you like. I found that I would be interested in indie music. I'd sort of settled into indie at that age, and then rave music came along, and I got fully immersed into that, and guitar music sort of took a back seat really, and it was an amazing experience, the rave scene. But musically, really, does it stand up? I don't know if it does, but it's not the sort of thing you'd go home and put on at home. It was just of a time and of a place, and it was crazy and exhilarating. But to be honest, I was looking for the next thing, and it seems to take ages. It sort of diluted into this club music, and it was dark and it was trancey and it was boring, basically, I found. And the next big thing was Britpop. Bit of a bad name, but some great music came out of it. Great times.
Yeah, great times indeed. Amazing time to grow up in and be a part of that scene. So I always like to find out what people are listening to at this moment in time. So I mentioned Brown Bear at the beginning. Obviously their new album Demons came out last Friday, which is a superb album, which I'm really enjoying. Ben, what are you listening to at the moment? Anything on in your ears at the moment?
So last year, or sort of still listening to now, Michael Head and the Red Elastic Band. So I really got into his album Dear Scott. Went to go and see him live with Moby Tanner, who's on Twitter, so we met up there, and also C6 Sailor, who does the artwork. So it was sort of a bit of a mini Twitter meet-up. And Yeah, really into him. I've liked him ever since he was in Shaq, and sort of followed his career. So I was really pleased that he did so well last year. I'm so busy like making music, I don't seem to listen to that much. I think I've had such a bank of listening experience that I don't really listen like I used to, unless I'm going on a trip. I mean, I'm really into my sports, so when I'm at work, it tends to be I listen to football a lot and things like, you know, talk sport and stuff like that, documentaries, podcasts.
Great stuff. Let me take you back then, Ben, to when you was a younger lad, had some money in your pocket, and it was time for you to go out and buy your first album or your first single. Do you remember what that was and what that experience was like?
I do, yeah. I was about 7 years old, I think, and I bought a single and an album in Woolworths in King Street, Jersey. Remember Woolworths? I had the top 40 singles all there on 45s. And the first single was Pass the Dutchie on the left-hand side. Remember that? Musical Youth?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the album was The Complete Madness. I've still got that. It's I've got a few albums sort of from those days, like Now. I've still got the Now one. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
First ever Now. That's what I call music. So yeah, those were the first two: Complete Madness and Musical Youth.
Some classics there. Some great stuff there. So Ben, this podcast is all about you getting to play at your fantasy festival. Are you a big fan of festivals? Have you been to many?
I haven't actually been to that many. It was a quite famous one in 2000, which was the Glastonbury one, just before the fences and everything went up. So it was pandemonium, absolute chaos. There was I think there was over 300,000 people there, maybe more. But it was, you know, a friend of mine was sort of walking with a crate of beer on his shoulder sort of through the crowd and got rugby tackled and stolen off him. It was that sort of, it was just very lawless and messy, but an experience, you know, all the same sort of thing. So I've been there once. I don't tend to do many these days. One I used to go to a lot was, I'll probably talk about it later, is one called Route de Rock in St. Barlow, France. I went to that 3 or 4 years in a row, I think, in the 90s. And that was brilliant. That had all the Britpop bands like Suede, Blur, and, you know, all the top bands of the time. We stayed in a campsite just up the road, and perfect, not too big, you know. I don't like huge, you know, unless I was playing on stage. Then again, I've only played to about 100. But yeah, that would be my sort of festival experience, really. Okay,
good stuff. And in terms of gigs then, so again, without spoiling your fantasy festival lineup if possible, do you have a favourite gig that you've been to see? Is there one that stands out for you?
Yeah, and they're not in my list of who will be at my festival, but I think one of my favourite gigs was with my brother, and it was a few years ago in Brighton, probably about 2010, and it was Foals. And from start to finish, it was just brilliant. You know, the music, it was their second album. Was it Total Life Forever, I think? It was just up, you know, the music was up, and it was a bit like that rave experience, if you like. It was when everyone is up. They had people up on the sort of round the top were dancing and everything, and he got on top of one of the speakers, and I think he does it quite a lot, but he jumps from the top onto the speaker and then down. It's a good performer, and great music, really. So yeah, that would probably be my favourite.
Yeah, great band, Foals, great stage presence and some great music, and a band who just seem to be getting bigger and bigger with every album they're releasing, which is always good to see. So the aim of the Fantastival Podcast, like I said at the beginning, is getting our guests to collate their fantasy festivals. So Ben gets to choose any 5 acts, one of whom must play one of their studio albums in full, and his 5 acts get to play an encore, which is basically all of them playing one song together to close Ben's fantasy festival. So very simple for any first-time listeners. 5 acts get to take 5 time slots. So for example, in the last episode of the Fantastival Podcast, I had Matthew Hickman from Brown Bear. He created his Afrochella Fantasy Festival, and in his opening slot, he picked Young Fathers. Super Seconds, he picked Little Sims. Midway Madness, he picked Lauryn Hill and had her play the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill album in full. For his pre-headline act, he picked Kendrick Lamar, and for his headliner, he went for Stevie Wonder. And for his encore, he went for a hip-hop medley based on Stevie Wonder songs that he just about got away with. I was very lax in the rules there. I let him get away with that because he had Stevie Wonder there, and he had a rapper and a backing vocalist, and it seems to be perfect. So he just about got away with that one. So Ben, I'm looking forward to hearing all about your lineup. But before we do, we need to give your fantasy festival a name and a venue. So Ben, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
Okay, I'm going to call it Lost Souls Festival, and the location will be where I just spoke about before, which is Route de Roc, and that is St Malo, France. So I would ask the owner of there if I could use their location. It's like a castle. It's got big, huge castle walls around it, so it's like a nice big enclosed outdoor space, quite unique.
Great stuff. So we're going to France for your fantasy festival. Is there a reason behind the title of Lost Souls, or is that going to play into one of your acts, maybe?
It is indeed.
All right. So I think I may know who is going to play. Maybe not. You never know until someone talks about it. All right. So before we talk about your 5 acts then, Ben, are there any acts that you want to mention who you love but just aren't able to get into Lost Souls with us?
Well, I nearly went down a totally different route for the festival, and it's 5 different acts. But it was more 60s based, because obviously I didn't grow up then, but I would have loved to have seen, in their heyday, Rolling Stones, Beatles, Bob Dylan, The Kinks, David Bowie, those types of, icons, really. So I was going to go down that route, but then I thought I'll keep it to sort of what I've grown up with, really. I mean, there's so many. I mean, you could name like The Smiths, The Cure. There's Kate Bush, Cocteau Twins, Beach Boys, Stone Roses. None of them have made it. Madness, even. I loved Madness as a kid. I mean, who's going to be playing?
Well, you can only take 5, and you've got to be honest with yourself. So some big acts missing out. Some have played some fantasy festivals before. Some have to wait another week to make their first fantasy festival appearance. All right, so let's get cracking in. It's 2:00. Lost Souls are sold out. France is a lovely day. Everyone's happy. It's time for your opening act, Ben. So who are you going to have open Lost Souls?
The Lars.
Great shout. So the Lars been mentioned a few times on this podcast. So Ben, why are you going to have the Lars open your fantasy festival?
For me, they're just natural songwriters and performers. They write effortlessly catchy songs, melodies to die for. And I don't know, just when they play the guitar and sing, it just comes so naturally to them. It's all like one thing that's happening. It's not like a separate thing where somebody's holding the guitar and playing. It's, they really are a part of it. And I'd love to. Never seen them live, so I'd love to see that.
Great stuff. So Lee Mavers is bringing the Lars down. They're going to be your opening act and play from 2 till 3:00. Such a great album, that debut album. It's a shame kind of it never went anywhere else, but I think that kind of makes the legend even bigger, that there was only that one proper album. Do you know what I mean? It's so good.
But then John Powell went on to do loads of stuff, and he's massive talent himself, really. So maybe it's meant to be that way, but we've got what they've done. So
absolutely. So the Lars open your fantasy festival. We'll take a half-hour break at 3:00. That'll take us to 3:30, and it'll be time for your Super Seconds act. So Ben, who are you going to have as your Super Seconds act?
Okay, so I mentioned him before, and it's Michael Head and the Red Elastic Band. Michael, he inspires me so much as a songwriter. He's just such a humble man. He's a true artist, man of the people. Dear Scott, winning the Album of the Year, restored my faith in music and sort of gave us hope as a band, really, that there are better things to come and good things to come. But just a great songwriter.
And he seems like a really nice guy as well. So when I had Pete Wilkinson on the podcast about a year and a half ago, obviously he's quite close to Michael Head and only had good things to say about him. I had Simon Mason from the Hightown Pirates, who's a good friend of Michael Head as well, and said that he literally saved his life and made him write songs. Wow. So he seems like a really nice bloke as well.
Would love to meet him one day, but just seeing him, he's so humble on stage. He's just written what I think was the album of last year. It did get Mojo Album of the Year, and he did a podcast actually with the guys that do, is it Soda Jerker that do songwriting podcast? And he went in depth into one of the songs he's written called The Next Day, and to actually hear that insight, I'd like to hear lots more of that with songwriters. It was a real story about a guy that had been to sort of war and came back home, and when you hear it, you think, oh, the depth that's gone into that, it sort of makes you want to up your own game and sort of push yourself a lot more, really. Because sometimes words can just come to you when you're playing the guitar, but can you go a bit further? What's it about? Make it more colourful for the listener. So I'm trying to do that a lot more at the moment.
Great shout. So Michael Head and the Red Elastic Band are your Super Seconds act. They're going to play from 3:30 till 4:30. We'll take a half-hour break. Then that'll take us up to 5 o'clock. That'll be time for your Midway Madness act. So Ben, who's going to be your Midway Madness act?
Okay, it's not so much sort of midway madness, but I wanted to sort of have a nice sort of chilled band, because when you're at a festival, it's like the daytime is quite hard work. It's when it gets dark, it gets interesting, or sort of dusk is a good time, isn't it, at a festival? So this is that sort of tea time bit where you're sort of lying on the grass and, you know, just sort of relaxing. And it would be The War on Drugs. Just what an album they brought out. I think it's nearly 10 years old now, Lost in the Dream. Listened to it again today, and some of their new stuff as well. And it's got that space I like in the music, like Pink Floyd do it amazingly well. You don't know how they do it, but and you want to get lost in their music. They sort of invite you in, and it's very personal, and, you know, they'll definitely be there.
I find
perfect band.
Their music just tends to just flow. Like their albums, it's just a natural flow to it. It doesn't feel like they're particularly doing much, but they're obviously doing lots. It just feels like it's a very simple process, and it just flows very nicely and takes you where you need to go.
It's very simple, I think, underneath it. The chord changes and things are what we would all know, but it's the layers he puts on top of it, and obviously he's created a soundscape, really, of it's all those sort of intricacies, those little noises and big guitars, I suppose, as well, which I do like.
Great stuff. So the War
and solos.
Lots of great solos in their stuff. So the War on Drugs are going to be your Midway Madness act. Get play for an hour, and they will play from 5 till 6. We'll take another half-hour break. That'll take us to 6:30, and it'll be time for your pre-headline act. So 3 acts down, 2 acts left. So Ben, who's going to be your pre-headline act?
Okay, so the festival's named after their debut album, and it's Doves.
Great shout. I thought it might be when you said the title of your fantasy festival. So Doves, a great band. They get spoken about a little bit on the podcast. They don't often get picked for fantasy festival. So Ben, why are the Doves going to be your headliners, and why are we calling your fantasy festival Lost Souls?
Well, they're also going to play Lost Souls. So I think when it came out, it was like the early 2000s. And again, it was a bit of a lean time. You're sort of looking for music, and I know a lot of bands came out, like the Strokes and the Libertines, but they're probably a bit fast paced for me at that time, whereas Doves had that connection from sort of rave music and club scene, because they made music in that time as well. And I first heard the Sea Song on radio, and it's just like a moment where it clicks and goes, that's it. What I want to make music like that, exactly like that, and I've probably been trying ever since. But just again, great songwriters, and, you know, there's some really big hits, didn't they, as well, after that first album. I can't remember. There Goes the Fear and things like
Pounding,
that. But,
yeah.
the album they brought out last year, or the year before, I think it was now, the Universal One, that was a fantastic album as well. We were meant to go and see them live as a band, but they're not playing live at the moment. They cancelled. So it'd be good to see them back.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
I have seen them before.
I think Jez isn't too well. I think from what I remember reading, one of the members isn't too well. But great live band. I think for me, like War on Drugs, their albums just effortlessly flows, and it just feels like it's just taking you again where you need to be. That Lost Souls album reminds me of when I was a very young temp at HMV Oxford Street, because when we closed Oxford Street, Doves were the last act to play on HMV, and they played on the roof. So as part of supporting that, we had to play that Lost Souls album a lot. And it was one of those, the more you hear that album, the more it grows on you. So by the time I'd heard it quite a lot, I actually got quite into that album in a big way. I think that's a fantastic album and a great choice you made.
It is. It really is. I mean, the Cedar Room, we used to, before we go out on a night out, we'd all be sitting and having a few beers, and we'd put on that album, and the Cedar Room would be the sort of track before you just sort of went out. You're sort of all pumped up and ready to go. So yeah, just a great band, and, you know, make great music. So yeah, they'd be Lost Souls in Full, definitely.
Great shout. So the Doves are your pre-headline act. They're going to play Lost Souls in Full from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We're going to take one more half-hour break, and that'll take us to 8:30, and it'll be time for your headline act. We're going to get 2.5 hours to play your fantasy festival. So Ben, don't leave us waiting any longer. Who's going to headline Lost Souls?
Anyone who knows me well will know there can only be one band, and that is Radiohead. Radiohead are my band. As in, as soon as I heard them, I've been with them ever since, and they've given me everything I've wanted in music from when I first. I didn't have the first album. I have gone back and got that, but I bought the Bends in a sort of supermarket back home, and I'd not really heard of them much, but I sort of bought it on a whim, just like the look of the picture maybe, and blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. It's actually hard to pick their best album. I know people go on about OK Computer, which probably is, but the Bends is a bit more of a personal album, and it's sort of maybe it's hard to explain. OK Computer is sort of out there a bit more musically, whereas the Bends, you can strum a few of those on the guitar. And but when Oasis were massive, we went to Spain a couple of times on holiday, and we'd listen to Oasis getting ready to go out or playing cards and stuff. And then when it was chill time, we used to put Radiohead on. And I thought, my mates were already into Oasis, and I thought, I'll sneak this on and see if they like it. And by the end of the holiday, they loved it. It became part of the holiday. Some holiday, isn't it, having Radiohead? Yeah. So I'm lucky enough to see them a couple of times as well. I travelled all the way from Jersey to Cardiff without a ticket.
Oh, wow.
And met a girl that's at university in Plymouth, and we travelled up together and got a ticket outside. And I've done that a few times, did it with Future Islands and bands like that. You know, you just get the urge to want to go and see them, and you do anything to get there and do it. So yeah, that was the OK Computer gig as well.
So you're going to have them play the bulk of their set from the Bends and OK Computer, or would you want to really round
whatever they want?
They could do whatever they like. Okay. So Radiohead are playing your Fantasy Festival. 6-time Radiohead have been selected for a Fantasy Festival. So Tom is bringing Johnny and the boys to play Lost Souls. So at 11 o'clock, they're going to bring back out Doves, The War on Drugs, Michael Head and the Red Elastic Band, and the Lars. And they all get to play one song of your choice, Ben. It could be any song. You can have them play whatever you like. So what song are you going to have this talent pool on your stage play to close your Fantasy Festival?
This is hard because you could divide them in half. You've got the sort of upbeat singer-songwriters, and then you've got the sort of melancholic sort of space rock side. So half of them aren't going to be happy with the choice. But the old me would have gone for Karma Police or Let Down by Radiohead. But the me that is into music at the moment, I've chosen a song by Michael Head, and it's uplifting, which is rare for me, and it's Natalie's Party. I think it's just a good, fun song that they can all join in. Lee Mathers would love it. John Powell would love it. I think the Radiohead boys, they can go and have a cup of tea on the side. They've done their work. just leave it to the Liverpool boys.
Great stuff. So Natalie's Party is going to be your encore. So let's lock that in. And so we got the Lost Souls Festival taking place in the Roof de Rock Festival in Saint Malo in France. I hope I've said that right. I may not have done.
Yeah.
Opening act, we have got the Lars, Super Seconds, Michael Head and the Red Elastic Band. Midway Madness got War on Drugs. Pre-headline Doves, who are going to play their album Lost Souls in full. Headlining your Fantasy Festival, we're going to have Radiohead. And for your encore, they're all going to play Natalie's Party. Ben, sounds amazing to me. You happy to lock that one into the Fantastival vaults?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great stuff. So Lost Souls is done and dusted. It's in our vaults. It's going to be an amazing day for anyone who's lucky enough to grab a ticket. So before we finish this one, Ben, it seems like a very exciting time to be part of Moonlight Parade. Lots going on. What do the next couple of months look like further down the line, or 2023 look like down the line?
Well, practicing a lot for these gigs that are coming up, sort of early summer. New material. We're gathering quite a bit of new material at the moment, so hopefully there might be something towards the end of the year. The sort of first focus is on getting ready for these gigs and the American sort of CD that's getting released and stuff. We'll probably keep releasing bits and pieces as we go, like we have done with the singles, but hold a few back, and I would think towards the end of this year we would probably release something, maybe an album or an EP or something like that.
Exciting times. So let's just remind people then how they can find Moonlight Parade. So if anyone doesn't know of Moonlight Parade and know where to find them, Ben, let's give another shout out for your socials and your website and Bandcamp and whatever else you want to push.
Yeah, so got our own website which has got the vinyl and merch and everything on it, and that's www.moonlightparade.com. On Twitter, we're Band Parade. On Instagram, we are Moonlight Parade, and then you'll find us in the search bar in Bandcamp, Moonlight Parade. And I think don't they have an offer on there or something every Friday, or I think the band receive all of the profits or something on Bandcamp Fridays.
Bandcamp Friday, which happens, I think, one Friday every month, but I might be wrong. So yeah, Bandcamp Friday is the one to go to. And also, like we mentioned earlier, Ben and Moonlight Parade play in London on the 26th of May with Heavy North, which is going to be awesome. And you also play in June as well, supporting My Life Story, which is also going to be a fantastic gig to get yourself down to. And if you're in Liverpool, go and check out Moonlight Parade playing the historic Cavern Club, which is going to be amazing. I'm so excited for you to play that one.
And we actually played twice that day. We played in the Cavern Club and then the Cavern Pub. The Cavern Pub is free, so if you're around that area, you can just wander in there. I think they're on at 7:30 in the pub and then 5:30 in the club, which is a £5 to get in, I think, so well worth it. Well worth
it. You get double Moonlight Parade, not just one slot, double Moonlight Parade. What else more could you want? So that is it. Thanks to everyone who's listened to the 124th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. If you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe, give the Fantastival Podcast a review on iTunes, which is very simple to do. Or if you're listening on Spotify, you can now rate the show, which is easy to do. So please remember to do that, as it's very important to the algorithms of Spotify and iTunes and helps the podcast in more ways than you could imagine. As well as Moonlight Parade being on Twitter, so is the Fantastival Podcast. You can find us at Fantastival P. We are also on TikTok, which is a learning process for me. I still can't get my head around it, but I'm trying. So go and give us a follow on TikTok. And if you're not on TikTok or Twitter, you can email the podcast at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. On podcasts, we don't play music, but I'll get some tracks from Ben. I'll make a nice Spotify playlist of his chosen acts with Fantasy Festival. So in case you haven't heard of any of his acts, we can get some tracks for you to go and delve into his Fantasy Festival acts. So Ben, a massive thank you for being my 124th guest on the Fantastival Podcast. How have you found talking about music and the pain of collating your Fantasy Festival?
I've loved it. Thank you for having me. As I say, I've spent the whole week sort of writing down various lineups, and it's got me looking back a bit at music and maybe re-listening a bit again, because as I say, I haven't listened to that much. So the last week I've been going back over acts, and it's good to do that, actually. So thank you.
Mate, pleasure. Been great having you on. I look forward to seeing the Moonlight Parade support the Heavy North, which is going to be a great gig, and there'll be loads of people there watching. So I look forward to meeting you and the band and the Heavy North as well. So that is it. Like I said, I'll be back at some point with episode number 125. I'm away for Easter, so I'm not sure when 125 will follow. So please make sure to join me when it does. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.